fall. The ceiling vent in Val Mars' office was rated for 150 pounds of static load. Zyren Nox, falling through it at terminal velocity plus magical acceleration, weighed approximately 160 pounds on a stable day. Today was not stable. He hit her conference table, Henderson deposition, Exhibit A through M scattered like confetti, and kept sliding, momentum and probability both refusing to behave, until he fetched up against her ergonomic chair with a sound like a sack of glitter hitting a lawsuit. Val did not look up from her laptop. It was 2:17 a.m. The Henderson contract review was due Thursday. She was behind schedule. "You're bleeding on the Bates-stamped exhibits," she said. Zyren blinked, the blood reversed direction, re-entering his nose through sheer, chaotic embarrassment. "I'm being chased." "Evidently. Severin enforcers 3 blocks away, maybe 2. Probability's fuzzy when I'm scared." He tried to stand. His left leg insisted it was already standing elsewhere. "I need help. Legal help. Protection. Something binding." Val finally looked at him. Chaos Mage, former Severin asset, currently shedding gold flecks that evaporated before hitting carpet, violating several laws of thermodynamics and one firm policy regarding glitter and discovery materials. She was tired, she was literal, she was in retrospect catastrophically precise. "Binding precedent applies," she said. "You're retained. Scope of representation includes full defensive posture in perpetuity, terms to be defined." The air crystallized. Zyren felt something snap into place around his wrist, a pressure, a promise, a perimeter he could not cross. Val felt it too, though she would not understand until morning, her life force threading outward, anchoring itself to chaos, beginning the slow conversion of biology into statute. "Thank you," Zyren whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Val said, already turning back to her laptop. "I bill at $8.50 an hour, and you're getting a discount because you're bleeding on my work product." She did not notice the gold thread. She did not notice that when she said, "Stay put," testing her own exhaustion, muttering to herself. The Chaos Mage physically could not rise from the floor. She noticed on Tuesday, when the coffee machine started making exactly 165-degree coffee without being programmed, and the elevators arrived before she pressed buttons, and Zyren Nox followed her through the King County Courthouse at precisely 3 feet distance, like a satellite locked in dying orbit. But by then, the pact of perpetual advocacy had already begun eating her alive. Chapter 1. Assessment. Declan Carver smelled the glitter before he saw it, not the metallic tang of craft supplies or the chemical sweetness of cosmetics. This was preternatural glitter, the scent of probability being tortured into shapes it was never meant to hold, of chaos trying very hard to be organized and failing spectacularly. He knew that signature. He looked up from the Johannesburg acquisition. Valkyrie Mars was standing in his doorway, coffee in one hand, messenger bag in the other, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the tri-state area. Behind her, or more accurately, hovering in her approximate vicinity, was Zyren Nox. Declan's eyes narrowed. Zyren Nox. Chaos Mage, former Severin asset, the walking liability that Declan had specifically, explicitly told his legal team to avoid retaining under any circumstances whatsoever. And he was sparkling. Not metaphorically. The air around him shimmered with tiny flecks of gold that materialized, drifted for 2 or 3 seconds, then vanished, like they'd suddenly remembered they weren't supposed to exist. "Mars," Declan said very carefully. "Why is Zyren Nox in my building?" Val shifted her weight from foot to foot. A tell. She only did that when she was about to deliver information she knew he wouldn't like. "He's a client." The sparkling intensified. Zyren gave a little wave that left light trails in the air. "Hi, Mr. Carver," Zyren said. His voice had the particular pitch of someone trying very hard to be small and harmless. "I know you said never to come here, but I also can't leave, so here we are." "Can't leave," Declan repeated. "Legal obligation," Val said quickly. "Standard representation agreement. Very normal. Completely routine." Zyren made a noise that might have been agreement, or might have been suppressed hysteria. Declan looked at the space between them, approximately 3 feet, which was the exact distance Val maintained from everyone except family, and only then under duress. Except Zyren wasn't maintaining the distance, Val was. And Zyren was following, not walking with her, not beside her, following like a satellite locked in orbit around a very tired planet. "Nox," Declan said, "what did you do?" "I didn't do anything. I was being chased by Severin's enforcers, and I needed help, and Ms. Mars was working late, and I may have crashed through her ceiling vent." You crashed through her ceiling vent. It was an emergency. And then, Zyren looked at Val. Val looked at the floor. And then I asked for help, Zyren said quietly, and she gave it to me. Declan pinched the bridge of his nose. He'd known Zyren Nox for 3 years, known him as the Chaos Mage Severin kept on retainer for probability adjustment in high-stakes litigation, known him as the kid who'd tried to run 6 months ago and nearly gotten himself liquidated for breach of contract, known him as the walking disaster that Declan had specifically warned his entire legal team to stay away from because Severin's contracts were vicious and anyone who tried to interfere would end up in litigation, hell. And Val had retained him. Sit, Declan said. Val sat in one of the client chairs. Zyren remained standing behind her and slightly to the left, like he was afraid that sitting down might constitute some kind of commitment. Start from the beginning, Declan said. And Nox, I already know about the Severin contract, the default clause, and the liquidation provision, so skip to the part where you ended up bound to my sister-in-law. Zyren swallowed. Monday night. Severin's people found me. I ran. I didn't know where else to go, so I came here because I remembered you said Carver Industries had wards against hostile magic. Those wards are keyed to employees and authorized guests. I know, but I was desperate. And then I saw Ms. Mars' office light was on, and I thought maybe if I could just talk to someone, explain the situation, they could help me figure out what to do. So you crashed through her ceiling vent. The door was locked. Declan looked at Val. And you were working late because Henderson contract review, Val said. Due Thursday morning. It was Tuesday at 2 a.m. and I was behind schedule. So you were tired. Yes. And operating on autopilot. Yes. And when the Nox crashed through your ceiling, bleeding and panicking and begging for help, you said... Val was quiet for a moment, then very softly. Binding precedent applies. You're retained. Scope of representation includes full defensive posture, in perpetuity, terms to be defined. Declan closed his eyes. Show me your wrists, he said, both of you. Zyren held out his left arm immediately. There, wrapped around his wrist like a bracelet, was a thin line of gold thread. It pulsed gently in time with his heartbeat. Val held out hers more slowly. Same thread, same pulse, perfectly synchronized. How long? Declan asked. Since Monday night, Val said. It's Thursday. Yes. And in that time, has anything unusual happened? Val and Zyren exchanged glances. Define unusual, Zyren said. Declan gave him a flat look. Nox, I've known you for 3 years. I know what your chaos signature looks like when you're stable. Right now, you're sparkling like a disco ball having an anxiety attack. So I'll ask again, has anything unusual happened? The contract files have been organizing themselves, Val said, alphabetically, and by date, and by litigation risk assessment. Since when do contract files have opinions about litigation risk? Since Tuesday. What else? The coffee machine makes exactly the right temperature for whoever's using it, Zyren offered, without being programmed, and the elevators always come immediately when Ms. Mars calls them. And yesterday, I sneezed and accidentally turned all the pens in the supply closet into rainbow colors. But they changed back after she told me to fix it. She told you to fix it, and they changed back. She was very specific about wanting standard blue ink as per office policy, so they went back to standard blue ink. Declan looked at Val. Do you understand what you've done? I retained a client who needed representation. You created a magical guardianship with a Chaos Mage whose reality-bending abilities are now tied to your hyper-literal processing. Every instruction you give him becomes a binding magical command. Every time his magic responds, it uses your life force as fuel. Val had gone pale. My what? Your humanity. The energy that keeps you conscious and not a magical construct. How have you been feeling lately? Tired, Val said slowly. And fuzzy. Like I can't quite think clearly. That's the drain. You're converting into a living contract. At this rate, you have maybe a week before you're a statute with a heartbeat. Silence. Zyren made a small, wounded noise. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I needed help and she offered, and I thought it was just a normal attorney-client thing. It would have been, Declan said, if you were human. But you're a Chaos Mage with ease of compliance disorder, and she has hyper-literal contract savantism. The binding split the difference between what you both thought you were agreeing to. Can you fix it? Val asked. I can't, Declan said, but I know someone who might be able to. He picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts, found the number he needed. Who are you calling? Val asked. Specialist. He deals with supernatural contracts involving humans with processing differences. If anyone can untangle this without killing both of you, it's him. The phone rang once. Twice. On the third ring, a voice answered. Smooth. Professional. The kind of voice that belonged in NPR interviews in expensive law firms. Travis speaking. Travis, it's Declan. I have a situation. What kind of situation? Declan looked at Val and Zyren, at the binding threads, the glitter, the way Val was starting to look translucent around the edges. The kind where my sister-in-law accidentally bound Zyren Nox and is currently being converted into a legal document. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, Nox, the Severin asset. Former Severin asset, he defaulted. Jesus, how bad is the binding? Magical guardianship, full compliance clause, she's got maybe a week. Another pause, then quieter. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Thank you. Declan? Yeah? Don't let her give him any more instructions. Nothing. Not even hang in there or keep your chin up. Her literalism is feeding his chaos magic and it's eating her alive. Understood. The line went dead. Declan set down the phone and looked at Val and Zyren. Help is coming, he said. What kind of help? Val asked. The kind that specializes in cases like yours. Vulnerable Entity Advocacy. He's Fae, so he understands magical contracts. And he's dealt with humans who have processing differences before. Will he be able to fix it? If anyone can, Travis can. Declan looked at Zyren. And Nox? When he gets here, you tell him everything. The Severin contract, the default clause, the liquidation provision, all of it. He can't help if he doesn't have the full picture. Okay, Zyren said quietly. And Mars? Yes. No more instructions. I don't care how reasonable they seem. Don't tell him to do anything until Travis gets here. I understand. Good. Declan opened his desk drawer and pulled out the whiskey. It was definitely not too early for this. Chapter 2. Ease of Compliance. The supply closet at the King County Courthouse smelled of industrial cleaner and old verdicts. Val stood between mops and boxes of toner cartridges, trying not to hyperventilate, while Devon Travis unlocked a door that shouldn't exist, the third door on the left, in a closet that only had 2 walls. After you, he said, holding it open. Val stepped through. The office on the other side was not an office. It was a pocket dimension that looked like a law library had conceived a child with a sensory-friendly waiting room. Soft, amber lighting that didn't buzz. Chairs with weighted blankets draped over them. Walls lined with books that hummed instead of screaming. And on the wall, a brass plaque. Your literalism is valid. Your binding is not your fault. Val stared at the sign. Her throat tightened. Sit, Devon said. Not a command, an invitation. He gestured to a chair that looked like it had been engineered by someone who understood the specific horror of fluorescent lights and scratchy wool. Val sat. The chair embraced her. Weight settled on her shoulders, not heavy, just there. Grounding. Devon moved to a soft focus lamp, adjusting it so the bulb didn't glare in her eyes. He was wearing a cashmere cardigan over his Tom Ford suit. It shouldn't have worked. It was devastating. Tea? He asked. I don't want tea, Val said. Her voice sounded brittle. I want to not be turning into a PDF. You're not turning into a document, Devon said, settling into the chair across from her. He moved like he was trying not to startle a feral cat. You're experiencing conversion of biological autonomy into statutory instrumentality. Different mechanism, similar outcome, reversible with proper accommodation. Val gripped the armrests. The fabric was velvet. It didn't fight back. You said accommodation twice now. I'm not disabled, Mr. Travis. I'm efficient. Not a condition, Ms. Mars. A vulnerability. Devon leaned forward, elbows on knees, his hands clasped loosely. Ease of compliance. It's a documented phenomenon in humans exposed to liminal contract structures. Your species evolved to take language literally as a survival mechanism. Because if someone says don't touch the fire, you need to not touch the fire, Val interrupted, the words coming out sharp. Yes, I know. I'm literal. I'm rigid. My sister says I alphabetize my emotions. Exactly. Devon's voice dropped, gentle, devastating. You're hyper-literal. You're a savant at parsing intent, but magical contracts exploit that. They weaponize your neurotype. Val went still. What? When you said binding precedent applies to all parties to Nox in that conference room, you didn't know you were invoking the Pact of Perpetual Advocacy, did you? Val blinked. The memory surfaced. Zyren falling through the ceiling, glitter everywhere, her saying binding precedent applies because she was being thorough, because she was being good at her job. I was being thorough, she whispered. Devon stood. He moved toward her, very tall, and stopped exactly 3 feet away, respecting her space, but close enough that when he lowered his voice, it vibrated in her sternum. To a human, yes. To a creature of pure obligation, you performed a soul-binding marriage rite disguised as diligence. The room tilted. The weighted blanket felt suddenly too heavy. That's not possible, Val said. I didn't say I do. I didn't sign a license. I didn't. You invoked binding precedent. You declared full defensive posture. You established consideration without limit. In contract law, that's a merger of estates. In magical law, that's a claiming. Devon's eyes were ancient and kind and terrible. You married him, Ms. Mars. Not in the romantic sense, in the proprietary sense. You took on his debts, his chaos, his existence, and because you did it without knowing the language, without accommodation for your literalism, the magic took you at your word. Literally. Val stared at her hands. They were starting to go translucent again, the edges blurring into paper. So I'm not just bound, she said slowly. I'm... what? His wife, his guardian, his, Devon said simply. And he is yours. Mutually, absolutely, and catastrophically. That's why you can't be more than 3 feet apart. That's why you're turning into a statute, a document that defines your relationship. The magic is trying to formalize what you accidentally instantiated. Val looked up at the sign on the wall. Your literalism is valid. I didn't mean to, she said. The words felt small. I was doing my job. I was being precise. That's not your fault, Ms. Mars. Devon crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level, the cardigan pooled around his elbows. You're neurodivergent regarding contractual perception. You need accommodation. You need someone to review the language before you speak it. Someone to filter the magic through a buffer that understands your rigidity is a feature, not a bug. Like a translator, Val said. Like an attorney, Devon corrected. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched the gold thread around her wrist. It pulsed, warm and possessive. I specialize in this. Humans who get tricked not because they're stupid, but because they're honest. Because they say what they mean and expect the world to play fair. Val looked at him. Really looked. At the cashmere over the armor, at the soft lighting designed to prevent meltdowns, at the way he had stopped exactly 3 feet away because he had noticed her flinch when Zyren got too close. You built this office for people like me, she realized. I built it for people like us, Devon said quietly. Now, let's figure out how to dissolve this marriage without killing either of you. And this time, I'll handle the language. He held out his hand. Val stared at it. Outside in the real courthouse, bailiffs were calling dockets, and lawyers were lying, and the world was continuing its chaotic, unstructured mess. But here in the supply closet, that wasn't a supply closet, everything made sense. Val took his hand. Chapter 3, Hyperlexia. Late afternoon, golden hour, artificial. Val stared at the sign on the wall, your literalism is valid asterisk, and felt something crack in her chest. Not a bone. Something more fundamental, a calcification she'd carried since childhood, the one that made her alphabetize her panic attacks and file her feelings under inefficient. She looked up at Devon. Her jaw was tight, teeth grinding quietly the way she did when opposing counsel cited the wrong precedent. You're saying I'm legally incompetent? She expected the usual. The pity, the patronizing pat on the head that said, bless your heart for being so literal, try yoga, maybe stop caring so much about subsection B. She expected him to look at her like her sister did, like a clock that ticked too loud. Devon reached out, slow, excruciatingly slow, giving her the time to flinch, recoil, pull away. His fingertips brushed her shoulder. It was grounding. It was terrifying. He was warm, radiating through the cashmere, and his fingers pressed just hard enough to remind her where her body ended and the air began. The gold thread connected them hummed, a lowered third in a chord she couldn't name. I'm saying you're vulnerable, he said, voice pitched low, right at the threshold of hearing. And I'm saying... He glanced over her shoulder. Val turned. Zyren was stuck to the wall. Not metaphorically. Physically adhered, spread-eagled like a motivational poster about teamwork, flickering between solid and translucent mist. Gold glitter pooled on the floor below him, falling in discrete, quantized drops, plink, 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 like he couldn't decide whether to obey gravity or Val. "You told him stay put," Devon observed. "Severin told him remain stationary before the bailment transferred. Now he's trying to comply with both simultaneously. Quantum superposition." "Mr. Nox," Val said, standing. The weighted blanket fell from her shoulders. "You can move now. I release you from—" "I can't," Zyren wailed, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "I'm staying put. I'm remaining stationary. I'm being both at once, and my atoms hurt." Devon's fingers tightened on Val's shoulder. It should have been invasive. It was the only thing keeping her from dissociating into pure lexical analysis. "I'm accommodating your disability, counselor," Devon said, and his voice went deadly quiet, a threat wrapped in silk. "Now, let's discuss Mr. Travis's claim, and how we're going to argue him into compliance without you dissolving into pure contract law." Val looked from the Chaos Mage quantum entangled with the drywall to the Fey attorney holding her together with one hand and a terrifying amount of eye contact. "He's not Mr. Travis," Val said, her voice steadier than it should be. "He's Mr. Nox. You're Mr. Travis." "I'm Devon," he corrected. "You're Val. He's currently a probability wave function, but we usually call him Zyren. And in 28 days, we're going to be married." The room stopped. Even Zyren stopped flickering, his face freezing in a rictus of glitter and confusion from the wall. "Pardon?" Val's voice was a filing system crashing. "Corporate merger," Devon clarified, releasing her shoulder. He moved to his desk, actual mahogany, not particle board, and produced a blue-backed brief. "The only way to dissolve the bailment I'm holding for Carver before it converts to absolute assignment is to marry the original obligee, you, to someone who can assume the debt-equity ratio of the binding." "You," Val said. "Or him," Devon said, nodding at Zyren, who had slipped 3 inches down the wall, still vibrating. "But he's already married to you via the Pact of Perpetual Advocacy. So technically, to dissolve the binding via statutory conversion, we'd need to merge all 3 estates, a tripartition of marital assets." Zyren fell off the wall and landed in a heap on the floor. He looked up, ears ringing with magic and indignation. "You're saying we have to get group married to fix this?" "I'm saying we have to survive the preliminary injunction hearing first," Devon said, handing Val a document. "Tomorrow, King County Courthouse, real courtroom, human judge." Val scanned the heading. Mars, motion for reasonable accommodation for contractual hyperlexia. "You can't put that in a filing," Val said, her professional horror temporarily overriding her existential panic. "Hyperlexia isn't in the DSM-5, and you can't say contractual without explaining the binding. You can't say any of this to a human judge." "I can," Devon said, adjusting his cuffs. The Tom Ford peered out from under the cashmere. "I'm going to argue that you have a cognitive processing difference that requires accommodations under the ADA, that your hyper-literal interpretation of contractual language constitutes a disability requiring assistance, namely me. I'll explain that without proper accommodation, you inadvertently enter binding agreements because you parse language faster than neurotypical counsel." "And the gold thread?" Val asked, holding up her wrist. It was glowing brighter now, feeding off the proximity to both men. "Specialized assistive technology," Devon said smoothly. "Like a service dog, or a wheelchair. The judge sees a gold bracelet. I see a tether preventing my client from wandering into a severance agreement she can't escape." He looked at them both. Val with her rigid spine and her color-coded soul, Zyren with his glitter-stained suit and his wrists still trying to obey contradictory instructions. "You're both vulnerable," Devon said. "You take words too literally. He obeys words too literally. You need someone who can speak the language of limitation, who can put guardrails on your respective compulsions, who can make sure that when you say 'till death do us part,' you mean it in the tax filing sense, not the metaphysical annihilation sense." Val looked at Zyren. Zyren looked at Devon. The gold threads between all 3 of them pulsed in sync. "We're going to be a throuple," Zyren said, wonderingly. "A corporate throuple, with bylaws?" "With a prenup," Val corrected, the legal instinct saving her from the emotional freefall, "and exit clauses, and specific performance standards." "And separate bedrooms," Devon added, "until we resolve the Severin liquidation claim. I'm accommodating your boundaries, not abolishing them." Val looked at the 2 of them, the Chaos Mage who had fallen through her ceiling and the Fey attorney who had caught her when she was falling through herself. She thought about tomorrow's hearing, where she would have to sit next to Devon, while he argued to a judge that her literalism was a feature, not a malfunction, that she needed protection, not correction. Fine, Val said. But I get to redline the marital agreement, and no one uses the word hyperlexia without a footnote. Noted, Devon said, and smiled. The first real one Val had seen, sharp and soft and absolutely binding. Zyren, finally free of the wall, drifted to exactly 3 feet away from Val, then stopped. The binding tugged him closer. He resisted, trembling, holding his ground. Baby steps, Devon said, and offered them both a weighted blanket. Chapter 4. Precedent. The Interstitial Library. The Interstitial Library existed in the space between due dates. Val knew this because the entrance was a door in an alleyway that only appeared when you were running late for something else. They'd lost 10 minutes looking for it while Declan growled about having a meeting with the Tokyo office that he was now compulsively reorganizing by time zone priority. The holding was already affecting him. He'd alphabetized the sugar packets at the coffee shop while waiting for Devon to pick the lock. "Stop that," Devon told him as Declan tried to straighten the no parking sign on the library door. "The binding is giving you her organizational urges. Try to resist." "It's crooked," Declan snarled. "It's a magical ward against literacy," Devon said. "It's supposed to be crooked. Straighten it, and we get attacked by card catalogs." Declan's hand hovered. He pulled it back with visible effort. 29 days, he muttered. 29 days, and I either fix this or I become a living trust instrument with a very organized filing system. Zyren was hovering. Not magically, just physically, bouncing on the balls of his feet, unable to stop moving now that he wasn't locked in Val's orbit. He kept drifting toward her, then catching himself, and drifting again, like a compass needle searching for north in a magnet factory. "I can help," Zyren said for the 7th time. "I can look at things chaotically. Maybe the book we need will just appear if I want it badly enough." "That's not how probability works," Val said, stepping through the door as it creaked open. "That's exactly how probability works," Devon corrected, following her. "But please don't. The last thing we need is a manifestation of the concept of binding in hardcover. The late fees would be metaphysical." Inside the library was a Mobius strip of mahogany and regret. Shelves stretched upward into fog and downward into shadow, meeting somewhere in the middle where the geometry got lazy. Librarians glided between stacks, some human, some shelved vertically when not in use, one that appeared to be a swarm of legal pads with teeth. Val took a breath. She loved it here. It was organized by a system that predated Dewey Decimal, a complex taxonomy of intent and semantic resonance. It should have been chaotic, but to her literalist brain, it was perfectly logical. Books about fire were slightly warm to the touch. Books about water left dew on the shelves. Books about death were bound in black and whispered. "Valentine versus Wintercourt," she said to the nearest librarian, a woman with glasses chained to her ears with actual chains. 1647, precedential binding law. The librarian didn't look up from her stamp. "Restricted stacks, north by northeast spiral, section matrimonial mergers and magical acquisition sites. You'll need a reference key." "I have a reference key," Devon said, producing a silver tooth from his pocket. "Pulled it from a case in 1823. Very fresh." The librarian sniffed. "Fakey. Acceptable. But the restricted stacks require accompaniment?" She looked past them, at Zyren, who was currently glowing slightly because he'd accidentally touched a book about bioluminescence and now matched the shelving lights. "Him," the librarian said. "The chaos element. Restricted stacks are probability locked. He'll trigger the release mechanism." "I will?" Zyren asked. "Accidentally?" "Specifically accidentally. If you try to help on purpose, you'll summon the wrong book. If you wander chaotically, you'll trip the wards." Val looked at Zyren. Zyren looked at Val. The space between them was exactly 3 feet, but now it was just habit, not magic. It felt empty. "Go," Val said. "Wander chaotically." Zyren's face did a complicated dance of relief and anxiety. Okay, chaotic wandering, I can do that. I'm very good at that." He spun in a circle with his eyes closed, then started walking. Val wanted to tell him to watch his step. She bit her tongue. Hard. They followed. The north by northeast spot spiral was headache-inducing. Stairs that went sideways, gravity that negotiated by committee. Declan kept trying to straighten the handrails. Devon kept pulling him back. Zyren bumped into a shelf, muttered an apology, and a panel slid open, revealing a reading room that smelled of dust and broken betrothals. "There," Devon said, pointing. A single book on a pedestal, Valentine versus the Wintercourt, a study in binding precedent. Val approached. The book was bound in leather that looked like frostbite. She opened it. The pages were handwritten in iron gall ink, smelling of blood and cold. She read. The case was simple. A human, Valentine, bound to a fey knight for protection against wolves. The knight had hyper-literal interpretation of oaths. Valentine had something else. A need for chaos, for change, for the unpredictable. They were bound, just like Val and Zyren. The conversion had begun. The dissolution clause, Val said, flipping pages. Where is it? She found it. Devon read over her shoulder, his breath catching. Oh, he said quietly. Oh, hell. What? Declan demanded, trying to read upside down, while simultaneously aligning the books on a nearby shelf by spine color. How is it dissolved? Val's finger traced the text. Her finger was trembling. She didn't tremble. She was efficient. The night took on the mortality, she whispered, as we knew, but the binding itself, it wasn't severed. It was... She looked up at Zyren, who had stopped wandering and was standing very still, listening. It was converted to matrimonial property, Val said. They got married. The binding merged their estates under coverture law. The magical debt became a marital asset. Joint tenancy. She swallowed. They didn't dissolve the binding. They just made it permanent and reciprocal. Till death do they part. Silence. The library seemed to lean in, listening. So to free Declan, Zyren said slowly, we would have to merge the estates permanently, Devon finished. The corporate merger idea, but personal, absolute. You wouldn't just be bound, you'd be... Married, Val said. She looked at the thread around Declan's wrist, white, pulsing, temporary, then at Zyren, free, chaotic, alive. She thought about the coverture mechanics, the legal architecture that had allowed Valentine to survive, not by escaping the binding, but by restructuring it, by making it reciprocal, by choosing it. Not just married, Val said slowly, collaborative completion. The original contract was incomplete. Terms to be defined. We finish it together, all parties, not me optimizing alone, not Devon bearing the load, all of us, defining the terms. Devon looked at her. That's not in the case law. It will be, Val said. Precedent applies. Chapter 5. Tripartite Arrangement. Devon was beginning to regret his life choices, specifically the choice to answer Declan's call, the choice to perform substitution of consideration without a binding circle, and the choice to keep a fully stocked bar in his office, within literal arm's reach of a Chaos Mage who currently responded to every declarative statement like it was a divine commandment. This is a disaster, Devon said, staring at the 3 golden threads connecting his wrist to Val's and Zyren's. The threads stretched across his office like the world's most expensive cat's cradle, pulsing in a rhythm that suggested they were developing a group heartbeat. Correction, Val said, looking up from the contract she'd spread across Devon's desk. The matter of Nox versus Zyren et al., which she'd produced from her messenger bag like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. This is a temporary tripartite magical guardianship with unstable consideration parameters. A disaster would involve severed limbs or structural fire. I can do fire, Zyren offered, helpfully from the corner, where he was trying to sit on a chair that kept turning into other furniture due to proximity anxiety. Don't, Devon and Val said simultaneously. Zyren nodded, then immediately stood up because Val had said don't, and his ease of compliance disorder had interpreted that as an instruction to stop existing in a seated position. He hovered awkwardly halfway between standing and crouching, glitter pouring from his hair in what Devon was learning to recognize as distress confetti. Mr. Nox, Devon sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. When I said don't, I meant don't start a fire, not don't sit. I know, Zyren said, still hovering. But the binding it's like autocorrect, it just does the thing. Sit, Val said. Zyren sat. The chair turned into a chaise lounge. Stop that, Devon told the chair. The chair turned back into a chair, offended. Val frowned at her wrist, where the gold thread had brightened. The conversion is still progressing, slower but measurable. She looked at Devon. You're shouldering approximately 40% of the load. I can feel it, Devon said, rotating his shoulder. It felt like carrying a filing cabinet down an elevator shaft, which was, ironically, exactly what his true name sounded like. At this rate, we have 2 weeks, maybe 3. Before we all become legal documents, Zyren asked. Before I become a legal document, Val corrected. You become a footnote. Mr. Travis becomes, I don't know, a table of contents? I become an index, Devon said dryly. Fae don't turn into documents, we turn into architectural features. He paused. I'll probably be a very organized card catalog. Val looked at him with an expression that was, for her, bordering on emotional devastation. It involved a slight widening of the eyes and a 3% downturn in the left corner of her mouth. That would be inefficient. You're too mobile for archival storage. Thank you. You're welcome. They stared at each other. The thread between them hummed. Zyren looked back and forth, then raised his hand. Not to interrupt whatever this is, but Severin's enforcement deadline is in 48 hours. If we don't dissolve my original contract by then, their goons will manifest literally anywhere I'm standing and drag me back for liquidation. We know, Devon said. We're looking for loopholes. Found one, Val said, tapping the document with her pen. The pen didn't turn into anything else, which Devon took as a minor victory. Section 4, subsection B, liquidation may be waived in the event of substitution by a qualified trustee. Devon leaned over her shoulder. He smelled like cedar and photocopier toner. That requires a trustee with equal or greater magical capacity to underwrite the debt. I'm good, but I'm not Chaos Mage good. I can't cover his magical collateral. Not you, Val said. Me. You're human. I'm bound to him. That creates a magical conduit. If I assume his debt, the binding converts from guardianship to... She paused, flipping through a mental Rolodex of case law. To a bonded pair, like a familiar contract, but reciprocal. That would kill you faster, Devon said sharply. The draw would triple. Not if we distributed it. Val pointed to the 3 threads. Tripartite. You, me, him. We form a corporation. Silence. Even the screaming drawer stopped screaming. A corporation, Devon repeated. A limited liability partnership, Val said, warming to the concept. Her eyes were doing that thing, where they got slightly brighter, like someone had turned up the voltage on her frontal lobe. We incorporate. Zyren assigns his contract to the corporation. We 3 become the board of directors. Magical debts become corporate liabilities, distributed equally per capita. I'm human, yes. But the corporation is a legal person, a statutory entity. She looked at Devon. If I'm going to become a legal document anyway, I might as well be the whole document, with bylaws. Zyren's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's insane, that's beautiful, and that's like marrying Excel to save your soul. It's technically feasible, Devon said, pacing now, the threads stretching and retracting with him like a golden rubber band. Interstitial court recognizes corporate personhood for magical entities. If we incorporate, the binding becomes a corporate governance structure rather than a biological conversion. But, he stopped. We'd need to structure it as specialized silos. No single authority. Val handles human law. I handle supernatural. Zyren handles chaos. But mandatory consultation triggers for any cross-jurisdictional magic, separation with interdependence, not hierarchy. Val nodded. Agreed. No CEO, no centralized control, just consultation, collaboration. A knock at the door. 3 sharp raps, followed by 2, followed by 1. The rhythm of someone who had filed the correct paperwork to knock on a Fey attorney's door. Devon checked his wards. They showed nothing, which meant whoever was outside was either mundane or powerful enough to register as a blank space. Stay here, Devon said. Don't move, don't speak, don't... Don't tell me not to do things, Val interrupted. It triggers him. Right. Don't. Not do things. Devon opened the door. A woman stood there. She was wearing a pantsuit the color of dried blood and holding a briefcase that was definitely older than the concept of litigation. Her eyes were cataract white, and she was smiling with teeth that were slightly too square to be natural. Devon Travis, she said. Her voice sounded like paper cuts. Severn sends its regards. We understand you've taken custody of our asset, and his +1. She looked past Devon at Val. We're prepared to negotiate a buyout. We're not selling, Val said from behind him. The woman's smile widened. Ms. Mars, how lovely. You're looking very... She sniffed the air. Statutory, tell me, have you started dreaming in citations yet? The conversion usually hits the REM cycle first. Zyren made a noise like a dying tea kettle. The air around him began to glitter dangerously, sharp little gold flecks that had edges. Leave her alone, Zyren said. It came out as a command. The room shook. The Severn representative's smile flickered. Oh, that's new. You've never given orders before, Zyren. You've only ever taken them. She looked at the threads, connecting the 3 of them. I see. You found a loophole. How resourceful. She stepped back. "48 hours, Mr. Travis, then Zyren asserts its right to collection. If the Nox contract isn't resolved, we'll take the collateral, all of it." She vanished. Not walked away. Vanished, leaving behind only the smell of cheap toner and expensive threats. Devon closed the door. He turned to look at Val and Zyren, at the golden threads, the glitter, the determined set of Val's jaw. "Incorporation," he said. "We do it tonight, but we do it right. Specialized silos, mandatory consultation, no one bears this alone." Val nodded. "I'll draft the articles of incorporation." "I'll provision the magical supplies," Devon said. "And Zyren looked at his hands, which were sparking with uncontrolled probability. "I'll try not to turn anything into a pumpkin before the paperwork clears." "Pumpkins are acceptable," Val said, already typing on her laptop. "They're legally distinct from squash in 12 states. Very defensible." Devon looked at the two of them, the hyper-literal human dying by inches, the Chaos Mage vibrating with anxiety, and felt the heavy weight of the thread connecting them, a filing cabinet falling down an elevator shaft. And for the first time in 3 centuries, he didn't mind the noise. "Right," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's form a corporation." Chapter 6. Incorporation. They signed the articles at midnight. The documents required blood. Zyren, who pricked his finger and spilled chaos into the ink, turning it purple gold. Starlight, Devon, who captured a ray in a fountain pen. And Precision, Val, who used a 0.5mm mechanical pencil because she did not trust magical implements for signature blocks. The name: Mars Nox Travis Holdings, LLC. The structure: functional separation with mandatory consultation triggers. Val was not the CEO. Devon was not the general counsel. Zyren was not the CTO. They were co-managing members. Equal equity, unanimous consent required for any action affecting the corporate person's magical liability. Declan witnessed. He stood in the corner of Devon's office, wrapped in the white thread of the temporary bailment, looking like a man who was trying very hard not to alphabetize the books on the shelf by color. "This is insane," Declan muttered, signing as witness. "You're incorporating a chaos event." "We're accommodating it," Val corrected. She looked at Zyren. "Say the words." Zyren took a breath. "I, Zyren Nox, assign all rights, title, and interest in my person and probability debt to Mars Nox Travis Holdings, LLC, said assignment to be held in corporate solution rather than individual solution, pursuant to the articles herein." The gold threads flared, not snapped, transformed. They became corporate infrastructure. Val felt the drain distribute, equalize, become manageable. She looked at Devon. He looked back. They were still connected, but now it was Ethernet, not leash. "Now," Devon said, "we survived the hearing." Chapter 7. Judgment. Night Court, Room 304. The Honorable Judge Desdemona Vance did not look up when they entered. She was reading what appeared to be a lease agreement from 1843, written in blood on vellum, and marking it up with a red pen that screamed softly every time she circled a clause. "Carver," Judge Vance said, still not looking up. "You're 3 minutes early. I was going to finish this exorcism." "Your Honor," Declan said, stepping forward, "we filed an emergency motion for a writ of restitution and preliminary injunction." "I read it." Judge Vance finally looked up. Her eyes were pure black, no whites, no pupils, just liquid ink. "Interesting theory. Evicting a person from another person. Treating biological autonomy as commercial real estate." She looked at Val. "You're the petitioner?" Val stepped forward. The gold thread connecting her to Zyren stretched, then relaxed as he shuffled forward to maintain orbit. "Yes, Your Honor. I seek to evict the respondent from my personal premises." "On what grounds?" "Holding over after notice to quit. Unlawful detainer, he has occupied my personal space for 16 hours without lease or license, creating a tenancy at sufferance that accelerates my conversion into a statutory entity." Judge Vance's black eyes gleamed. "And Mr. Nox, you have response?" Zyren, who had been trying to make himself look like a lamp, stepped forward. I can't leave, Your Honor. I physically cannot. I tried to go to the bathroom alone and nearly extruded my own ribcage." "Medical incapacity," Declan offered. "Not recognized in landlord-tenant law," Judge Vance said. She tapped her gavel, a femur wrapped in legal wire, against the desk. "However, the petitioner's argument has merit, but the relief requested is impossible. You cannot evict a tenant who is medically incapable of vacating. The writ would be unenforceable." Val felt the floor tilt. "Then I'm converting. We have no remedy." You have no eviction remedy, Judge Vance corrected. She pulled out a file from beneath her desk, ancient, leather-bound, smelling of cigar smoke and tax shelters. But you have a corporate remedy. You filed articles of incorporation 3 hours ago. Mars Nox Travis Holdings, LLC. Devon stepped forward. Your Honor, that was preliminary. I have jurisdiction over corporate entities formed within my district, Judge Vance continued, unruffled. The petitioner, Ms. Mars, is seeking to separate from Mr. Nox, but separation is unnecessary if they merge. Merge, Val repeated. Corporate merger, Judge Vance said. The binding is a debt obligation. Zyren holds the original note, but your little LLC can assume that debt. Mr. Nox assigns his contract to the corporation. You three become the corporate officers. The corporation holds the debt, not you personally. Zyren's claim evaporates. They can't collect from a legal person that doesn't exist in biological time. Val's brain latched onto the technicality. The binding between Zyren and me persists, Judge Vance said. The merger doesn't dissolve the magical attachment, it just, relocates it. You'd still be bound, still converting, just slowly, and as a corporate asset rather than an individual. The room tilted again. So Zyren can't collect, Zyren said slowly, but Val still becomes a document, just a corporate one. Yes, Judge Vance said. You'd be the articles of incorporation, probably. The conversion tends to follow existing legal structures. Val thought about this. She thought about being a document, about existing as a filing cabinet of consciousness, aware but not alive, organized but not human. She thought about the Henderson brief, abandoned on her desk, and felt something that might have been grief or might have been relief that she wouldn't have to finish it. Then she looked at Declan, at Devon, at Zyren. I'm sorry, she said. Declan blinked. What? I'm sorry, Val said again. Her voice cracked, just slightly, just at the edges. I'm sorry I did this. I'm sorry you have to carry this, to become a trust instrument, to lose your wife's patience and your pack's stability because I was tired and literal and I didn't ask for help fast enough. The room went quiet. Even Judge Vance stopped writing. Devon stepped closer. No, Val said. Let me finish. I've been trying to optimize this, to solve it, to be the CEO of my own rescue, and I'm scared. And I'm sorry I dragged you all into my literalism. She looked at the thread around Declan's wrist, white, pulsing, temporary. I don't want to be a corporation, she said. I want to be a person, with help, with... She looked at Devon. With consultation. Devon reached out. His hand covered hers on the railing. The gold thread hummed between them. Then we find another way, he said. Collaborative completion, together. Judge Vance watched this exchange with the patient interest of someone who had seen 3 centuries of bad contractual decisions. There is one other option, she said. The bailment. Mr. Carver has already volunteered to hold the binding in trust. 30 days. If you can find a permanent solution that preserves the biological integrity of all parties, she shrugged. The court will recognize it. Declan sighed. The heavy sigh. The what did you get yourself into sigh. 30 days, he said. And I want hazard pay. Val looked at him. 15% over standard receiver rates, hazard escalation. I was joking. I don't joke about compensation. Declan almost smiled. Of course you don't. He signed the bailment papers. The moment his signature dried, the threads flared white, not gold, but white, the color of legal paper, of contracts fresh from the printer, and Val felt the weight lift. Completely. The thread around her wrist turned brittle, then crumbled into ash. She was free. She looked at Zyren. His thread was gone too, falling from his wrist like dead skin. Oh, Zyren whispered. Oh, I can feel the chaos again. It's just mine, not shared, not borrowed. You're still bound to the corporation, Judge Vance reminded them. Just shelved. Temporarily. We'll find a permanent solution, Devon said. He was looking at his own wrist, where the now white thread connected him to Declan. Together. Val nodded. Together. Chapter 8. Consolidation. 3 weeks after the bailment. Zyren had never made anything before. He had unmade things. He had scattered things. He had turned order into chaos with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever in a ball pit, leaving trails of glitter and violated natural laws in his wake. But sitting in Devon's office, which had expanded by probability debt to include a small kitchenette and a window that looked out onto Tuesday instead of the alley, Zyren tried to create. He focused on the space between his hands, just focus, which was like trying to herd cats that were also on fire and possibly imaginary. The chaos wanted to disperse. It wanted to turn the coffee table into a cloud of sentient marzipan. It wanted to make the window look out onto the Jurassic period. It wanted to do anything other than what he told it to do, because for the first time in weeks, no one was telling him to do anything. The bailment had transferred the binding to Declan. Zyren was free, and freedom, he discovered, was terrifying. "Come on," he muttered to his own palms, which were sparking with uncontrolled probability. "Be useful, be organized." The sparks laughed at him. They turned into tiny butterflies made of tax code, then evaporated. Zyren thought about Val. He thought about the way she alphabetized her panic attacks, the way she had stood in Judge Vance's courtroom and said, "I'm sorry," like it was a complete sentence, the way she looked at Devon like he was a statute she wanted to memorize. He thought about Devon, the cardigans, the patience that wasn't patience at all, but something older and kinder, the way he had touched Val's shoulder like it was a legal argument he was winning slowly. And he thought about the binding, not the golden thread that had locked him in orbit, that was gone, crumbled, ash on his wrist, but the new thing they were building, the corporation, the collaboration, the consultation. Zyren wanted to give them something. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. His hands stopped sparking. They started but compiling. It hurt. Ordering chaos was like trying to fold a tornado into origami. His atoms protested, his ease of compliance disorder, the thing that made him obey every command, every suggestion, every strongly worded memo, rebelled against the notion of volitional structure. It wanted external input. It wanted someone to say, "Make this," so he could comply. But there was no one here. Just Zyren. Just choice. He reached into the air and pulled out a sheet of vellum. Not paper, vellum made from compressed probability, the kind the interstitial cord accepted for amicus briefs. It tasted like static and old leather. He reached into his pocket, which currently contained a lint ball that was also small sun, 3 paper clips from 1987, and a marble that knew the future, and found a pen. Then Zyren Nox, Chaos Mage, former Severin asset, current living cultural resource and training, began to write. The words came out in glitter, not metaphorically, actual glitter suspended in the vellum, forming letters that kept trying to rearrange themselves into better arguments. He wrote about chaos, about obligation, about the difference between being bound and being maintained. He wrote, "Amicus curiae, the continued viability of chaos as protective structure." He argued that chaos properly stewarded was not destruction but preservation, that probability when consulted rather than commanded provided the flexibility necessary for survival, that a chaos mage was not a liability to be liquidated but a resource to be maintained, like wetlands, like historic theaters, like love itself. The brief wrote itself, as all good legal documents do, but Zyren edited it. He struck through a paragraph that turned into a sonnet. He added a citation to Valentine verses, Winter Court that tried to escape the page. He footnoted his own glitter. When he finished, the document was 17 pages, single-spaced, with appendices that existed in 5 dimensions. Zyren looked at it. Then he did something he had never done voluntarily in his life. He filed it. He walked, not orbited, not followed, just walked to the interstitial court's drop box, which was a raven that ate paperwork and regurgitated docket numbers. He fed the brief to the bird. The raven looked at him with eyes that had witnessed the Magna Carta. "Amicus," the raven croaked. "Friend of the court, you are not a party to any pending litigation." "I'm a friend," Zyren said. "That's the point. I'm contributing, without being compelled." The raven ate the brief. A docket number appeared in the air, floating in gold. The continued viability of chaos. Amicus curiae, Zyren Nox, pro se. When Val found it the next morning, listed on the interstitial docket while she was researching preservation covenants, she touched the glitter ink entry and cried. It was the most organized thing Zyren had ever created. It was entirely chaotic. It was perfect. She found him in the kitchenette, trying to make toast. The toaster was currently a small dragon that was hoarding the bread instead of cooking it. "You filed a brief," Val said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. "I made something," Zyren said. He looked at her, really looked, standing 3 feet away by habit rather than compulsion. "I wanted to. Is that okay?" Val crossed the 3 feet. She hugged him. It was inefficient. It was unstructured. It lasted exactly 4.2 seconds before she pulled back and cleared her throat and straightened her blazer. But it was enough. It's very okay, she said. Also, you're cited in case law now, forever. Zyren grinned. The dragon toaster surrendered the bread. I'm learning, he said. I think I'm learning how to be obligated without being bound. Val picked up the toast. It was buttered on both sides, defying physics, exactly the way she liked it. You're learning to be a person, she said. It's messy. Keep going. She left him in the kitchenette, surrounded by chaos that was finally properly his own. Chapter 9, Due Diligence. 3 weeks, 4 days, 16 hours remaining. Devon was researching in the space between midnight and 3 a.m. when the interstitial library's most dangerous volumes became legible to those desperate enough to read them. He found it in a footnote. In Re Thespis, 1847, a Chaos Mage who had bound himself to a theatrical company rather than an individual. The structure was archaic, predating corporate personhood, but the principle was sound. A living cultural resource could be maintained by stewardship rather than ownership. Devon read the case 3 times. Then he called Val. She arrived in 17 minutes, wearing pajamas under her trench coat, hair unbraided for the first time he'd seen. She looked young, breakable, beautiful in the way of perfectly organized file systems. I found it, Devon said, not looking up from the text. Zyren doesn't need to be bound to a person. He can be bound to a place, a performance, a perpetual obligation to entertain, with the venue itself as the counterparty. Val read over his shoulder, her breath caught. The Interstitial Repertory Theater. It's on the liminal register of historic places. Declining attendance, Devon noted. Endangered status. If we petition for Historic Preservation Covenant, we can designate Zyren as the authentic, chaotic experience necessary to maintain the resource. He becomes infrastructure. We become stewards. Not guardians, Val said slowly, not owners. Trustees. Devon finally looked at her. Really looked. 3 centuries of caution, of calculated distance, of treating emotion as liability, burning away in the space between them. I'm falling in love with you, he said. Not because I accommodate you, because you make me precise where I was vague, because you file your feelings alphabetically, and I finally understand the system. Val's hand froze on the shelf. The filigree thread between them glowed, chosen rather than compelled. That's inefficient, she whispered. I know, Devon said. It's terrifying. I'm 347 years old, and I'm finally experiencing inefficiency. Val kissed him. It was logical. It was the most logical thing she had ever done, because it completed the contract they had been negotiating since the supply closet, since your literalism is valid, since the first time he had stopped exactly 3 feet away and she had wanted him closer. The thread between them thickened, gold warming to something that looked like wedding bands, like covenant, like choice. Chapter 10, Preservation Covenant, 30 days minus 12 hours. They stood before Judge Vance one final time, but this time they were not petitioners. They were co-trustees, presenting the Mars Nox Travis Historic Preservation Covenant. Zyren was grinning so hard his glitter had achieved escape velocity. I'm going to be a landmark, he kept saying. I'm going to have plaque. Respondent Nox, Judge Vance intoned, her black eyes reflecting the golden glow of the covenant documents. Do you consent to designation as Class A living cultural resource? Said designation to include perpetual performance obligation, maintenance of authentic chaotic experience, and compliance with all applicable historic preservation ordinances. I do. Then catching himself, he laughed. I mean, I accept, I accede, I agree, but not in the binding way, in the I want this. The court notes enthusiastic consent, Judge Vance said dryly. She turned to Val and Devon. And the petitioners accept trusteeship? Co-equal, co-responsible, jointly liable for the resource's maintenance and preservation. Yes, Val said. Yes, Devon said. They held up their wrists. The threads between them, gold to gold, silver to Zyren's new regulatory band, pulsed in harmony. Then by the power vested in me by the Supernatural Preservation Act of 1847, Judge Vance said, slamming her femur gavel, I hereby declare this covenant preserved. The binding is not dissolved, it is maintained. The parties are separate but obligated. The chaos is contained but not constrained. She looked at Zyren. The theater awaits its headline act. Epilogue, First Anniversary Inspection. The Sands Showroom, Las Vegas, 8:47 p.m., sold out. The historic venue had been a parking lot since 1996. Tonight, it was a cathedral of chrome and velvet, resurrected by preservation covenant and probability debt. Val stood in the VIP box, clipboard glowing with regulatory compliance software. She was wearing her Brioni suit. Devon had insisted on Vegas standards. But she'd added a weighted scarf, the filigree thread from her wrist woven through the cashmere, visible only when she moved. On her left hand, a ring that had started as gold thread and solidified into something the interstitial court recognized as marital property, mutually filed. Structural integrity check, she murmured into her recorder. Quarterly review, Mars Travis trustees. Year 1, Vegas satellite venue. Below, the crowd shimmered. Humans mostly, some Fae. A few entities that registered on Val's clipboard as indeterminate. See Appendix C. Devon handed her a glass of something amber. He started. The lights didn't dim, they negotiated. The showroom agreed to go dark, but kept the exit signs at exactly the lux level required by Nevada Fire Code 1964 Amendment. Historic authenticity had safety standards. Zyren appeared on stage without walking on. He simply manifested at Downstage Center, wearing a tuxedo that was simultaneously black tie and pure glitter, Schrodinger's formal wear. The audience inhaled as one organism. "Ladies and gentlemen," Zyren said, and his voice came from the cocktail glasses, the slot machines 2 blocks away, the legal brief in Val's bag. "Tonight's performance is legally obligated to entertain you in perpetuity. Please find your seats. The fire exits are located wherever you believe them to be." Val's clipboard pinged. Ease of compliance disorder, active. Probability manipulation, 7.3 on the Richter scale. Historic authenticity, maintained, asterisk. "He's within parameters," she said. Devon leaned against the balcony rail, close enough that their shoulders pressed together, not orbiting, choosing. "He's happy." The show was cabaret, except the master of ceremonies was the concept of time itself, and Sally Bowles was played by a probability wave that kept forgetting her lines and inventing better ones. When Zyren sang "Maybe This Time," the showroom's historic pipes wept rust. Val checked her watch. "Third quarter financials, we need to verify the concession revenue before midnight." "He's performing, Val?" "He's also a 501c historic resource. The gift shop sales fund is preservation." Devon smiled, the one that had stopped being calculation and started being love somewhere around month 6. "Then we'll audit the gift shop, after the number." On stage, Zyren had reached the finale. He wasn't dancing so much as obligating the air to hold him up. He finished on a note that lasted exactly as long as the building code allowed for sustained, high-frequency exposure without ear protection. The crowd stood. The ovation was structural. The showroom itself applauded, its 1960s architecture vibrating in sympathetic resonance. Backstage, Zyren sat at a vanity that had once belonged to Sinatra, shedding glitter into a coffee cup. Exactly 98.6 degrees, Val noted, because he still remembered her preference, even though the binding no longer required it. "Inspection," Val said, producing her forms, but she was smiling. "Happy anniversary to you too," Zyren said, grinning. He pulled a cigar box from the vanity, not cigars but the quarter's receipts, organized by Val's own system, which he'd learned. "Gift shop revenue up 40%. The Chaos dice are selling well." Val took the box, then she set it down. She reached into her bag and produced a document of her own. "Amendment to the Covenant," she said. Section 4.2. "The trustees have determined that quarterly reviews may, at the resource's discretion, include social components." She handed Zyren 2 tickets. "Opening night, next quarter, the 3 of us, dinner. Not inspected." Zyren stared at the tickets, then at Val, then at Devon, who was leaning in the doorway with his cardigan sleeves rolled up and his eyes full of gold. "You're learning chaos," Zyren whispered. "I'm learning flexibility," Val corrected. "It's inefficient. I like it." She kissed Devon, there in the dressing room, that smelled of velvet and vintage probability, while Zyren catcalled from the vanity and the glitter rained upward, defying gravity because tonight the chaos was happy, contained, and completely free. End.